There is speculation that US President Donald Trump will approve the delivery of long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Sky News reports whether they will be able to change the situation on the Ukrainian front. The article states that Ukraine currently uses weapons such as the British Storm Shadow missile and the American ATACMS tactical missile system. Their range is only 321 kilometers. Tomahawk missiles are typically launched from a ship or submarine, but Ukraine will likely have to launch them from land. According to military analyst Professor Michael Clarke, Tomahawk missiles in Ukraine are likely planned to be used to attack transport hubs and Russian facilities located directly behind the front line. He also does not rule out that potential targets could include oil depots, marshalling yards, storage areas for stationary vehicles, and factories producing the drones with which Russia constantly attacks Ukraine. An attack on Moscow would be pointless and stupid unless they want to make a political statement that could backfire on them, Clarke said. The military analyst also noted that the fact that Russia regularly makes statements regarding speculation about the Tomahawk indicates that they are concerned. Of course, the Russians are concerned about Tomahawk missiles. They carry a fairly heavy warhead, they are difficult to shoot down, and they are accurate, Clarke noted. In his opinion, the Ukrainians could effectively use these missiles to disrupt Russia's offensive operation, which has been ongoing throughout this year. Media previously reported that The Hill cited experts who believe Tomahawk missiles would significantly extend the Ukrainian armed forces' range. Depending on the modification, Tomahawks can reach up to 1,600 kilometers. Therefore, with their help, Ukraine could launch deep strikes against Russian military nodes and oil infrastructure. There are a huge number of potential targets that Ukraine could strike, said Emil Castellelmi of Blackbird Group, adding that command posts, electronic warfare stations, air bases, and logistics hubs could be targets. This, he believes, would put additional pressure on Moscow. President Zelenski has already stated that if Tomahawk missiles are acquired, they will be used only against military targets and not against civilians. Representatives of Ukrainian analytical groups also note that such strikes could damage Russia's key launch sites for missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. However, some analysts believe that the risks of escalation are exaggerated. Putin will likely avoid direct conflict with the United States and NATO. Tomahawks will improve Ukraine's capabilities, but they are not a panacea. They require comprehensive planning and Western support to be effective, said Stacy Pettyjohn of the Center for a New American Security. Media also reported that aviation expert Anatoly Krapchinsky stated that Ukraine will need appropriate technological support and terrain intelligence to use Tomahawk missiles. Therefore, in his opinion, the challenges will lie not in the launchers themselves, but in the technological support that will allow the Tomahawks to be used to their full potential.
President Donald Trump is redoubling his efforts to end the war in Ukraine, announcing a second meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin one day before sitting down with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenski at the White House. Trump's announcement came shortly after finishing a call with Putin on Thursday. A date has not been set, but Trump said the meeting would take place in Budapest, Hungary. As the push for a diplomatic breakthrough continues, Maria Snegovaya, a senior fellow for Russia and Eurasia at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., said achieving an immediate ceasefire in the near future is very unlikely. Putin's goals largely remain unchanged, and unless he is faced with real sticks, not just carrots, a real worsening of the domestic situation, perhaps really strong resilient response on the Ukrainian side, Putin is unlikely to change his posture, Snegovaya told the Associated Press. Trump was already scheduled to meet Friday with Zelensky, who has been seeking weapons that would allow Ukrainian forces to strike deeper into Russian territory. Zelensky has argued such strikes would help compel Putin to take Trump's calls for direct negotiations to end the war more seriously. Trump tries to turn campaign promises into reality. Trump's renewed focus on the war in Ukraine comes after forging a ceasefire that could end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, a diplomatic accomplishment that he celebrated with a whirlwind trip to Israel and Egypt on Monday. Ending the wars in Ukraine and Gaza was central to Trump's campaign pitch last year, when he persistently pilloried President Joe Biden for his handling of the conflicts. Although there has been fragile progress in Gaza, Trump has been stymied by Putin, unable to persuade the Russian leader to hold direct talks with Zelensky. Friday's meeting with Trump and Zelensky will be their fourth face-to-face encounter this year.
It's always important to negotiate and talk. So in most instances, it's a good idea for President Zelensky and Donald Trump to meet, given also the intensification of the internal problems with energy infrastructure in Ukraine. So in that sense, I think such meetings are definitely encouraged. Having said that, just recently with CSIS, we released a brief outlining the most likely war scenarios going forward. And unlike other observers, we actually flagged that achieving an immediate ceasefire in the near future is very unlikely. It's one of the least plausible options. Even if Putin was willing to somewhat de-escalate, Russia remains significant disruptive potential by continuing its artillery shelling, drone attacks, and strikes deep into Ukrainian territory. And even if it slows down its push on the front line, it still has this potential to continue create damage and havoc in Ukraine domestically in an effort to undermine the commitment and resilience of Ukrainian society. Besides that, there needs to be much more support for Ukraine because Ukrainian situation on the front line, especially in terms of manpower, is not ideal. So there needs to be a lot of military provision in order to compensate for that. For a ceasefire to be achieved and for the Kremlin's sincere, genuine engagement in this process, domestic situation in Russia should significantly worsen. Economically, through sanctions, additional pressure on its energy export revenues. There were some really encouraging remarks coming from Trump administration in that regard. Hopefully, there will be an action that will follow. And of course, long-range strikes on Russian territory, and as well as rising costs for this continuing push in Ukraine. All of that is potentially achievable. However, it requires significant intensification of the Western commitment and support. And hopefully, that's what we will see going forward on the US side. Tomahawks, even if they're not decisive for Ukraine, will send an important signal. They demonstrate the commitment of the United States to support Ukraine, to continue, support democracy in this horrible struggle against an autocratic, revanchist new empire.